Welcome back. All right, so halftime between Brazil and Korea. I'm thinking of that meme from The Simpsons. Stop, stop. He's already dead. But we soldier on, and we'll see how the second half goes. But yeah, I think it's done. If there was a white flag that was going to get thrown at a World Cup, this might be it. So anyways, I wanted to get into this, and I thought, well, Monday's a good day to do this. So I want to talk first about who I hate this week, because every week I get accused of hating different teams. Sometimes there's that consistent you hate, and every week, and it's usually on the power rankings. There are certain people who jump onto the channel. And they're people I don't see on any of their videos. So I'll see a comment and I'll think, okay, have they made a comment somewhere else? Nope, they only come in for the power rankings, or that's the only time they comment. And so there's the various hating on, and there's hating on that I get accused of when it comes to St. Louis. The accusation being, too, that, well, he clearly hates Binnington, which is not true. But to state that I think a goaltender should stay in the net, let everybody else, do their jobs and make sure he's stopping the puck and just, not be any kind of a distraction or anything. I don't think that's hating on a goaltender. So Toronto, of course, there's still the continual you hate. And then the funny thing is that when Toronto moves up in the power rankings, there are the comments of, well, see, he caved to public pressure, when it's not. Every day, at the end of the day, I do go through and I update it. And I know there's people who have the doubts, but the reality is I tried at one point to make it so that I just updated the board on a Saturday. I didn't worry about the rest of the week. I didn't update it. And there was so much work I was having to put into it that it would take an extra hour, 2 hours for me to even be ready to do the power rankings. And it just, I wasn't happy with the result. I felt like, it's much easier if I just do this daily. I think it's more accurate for me when I do it daily. And again, it should be to show who's playing really well right now. So that is subjective, and that's why I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. And where the power rankings came from on the channel, of course, are that I used to look at power rankings on other sites and stuff, and I think, well, wait, that team won 3 games this week, and they dropped 4 spots because somebody got hurt. And this team lost all 3 games this week, but they got somebody back, so you moved them up. I don't understand. So I have my concerns based on that. Detroit, of course, there's he clearly doesn't like this team because he doesn't talk about them, because I get that with Columbus as well. There are certain teams that are definitely more conversational than others, where there's a lot to talk about or there's not very much to talk about. And I think there are certain franchises that there's less to talk about. It's just that's unfortunately the reality of it. Boston, the accusation is that I'm a fair weather fan because I actually will say out loud, I can't see them keeping this up, because I don't see them winning 20 out of every 23 games. I just don't. I don't see them winning 70 games this year. And I also say that because I want to temper that expectation. I have never been a fan that when a team I cheer for is number one, that I puff my chest out and, hey, my team's awesome and your team sucks. And I've never been that fan. And I think it's because I started out as a fan of Vancouver and the Minnesota North Stars, who didn't win anything. And so I learned at a young age that, being all boastful, because I would see people doing that about the Canucks when they would get hot and they'd be doing really well, and then it would fall apart. And I would see, usually in a school environment, people like, hey, so remember last week when you were all like talking about how great this team was? The only time I ever boasted about Boston was back in 91. Boston in the conference final, and I was like, oh, they're against Pittsburgh? Oh, they'll beat Pittsburgh. Because, yeah, Lemieux's never going to win anything. I said it out loud. I immediately regretted it. It was game 1, game 2 in that region. I was like, okay, so this isn't going the way I thought it would. And I've never boasted about Boston again, because I know that there's like a little superstitious part of me that says no. And also, it just doesn't come off right. So when I'm talking about Boston, I will always throw in this team's doing really, really well. I'm enjoying this while it lasts, because I know that it's a long season, and that a team that's number one and playing great in November is not necessarily a team that's looking great and playing great in April. Those can be two completely different things. So I can appreciate how well a team is playing and still temper expectations that way. But I understand that for some that comes across as, he really hates. Why isn't he just enjoying this? Oh, during the games I do. So when I'm watching a Canucks game, if Brock Besser scores, I do have a tradition of repeating his name a la Paul Heyman on Raw or SmackDown about Brock Lesnar, say Brock Besser. And, that's been a thing for years. Boston, when they win, I used to play shipping up to Boston every time they won a game. And over the last couple of years, I've stopped because I'm watching every game. So it'd be obnoxious to watch shipping up to Boston. Plus, it's only December, so we're not in shipping up to Boston territory yet, but we're not far off. So I do. And then with Dallas, for some reason, the Pantera song that they play when Dallas scores, it just, the drum beat is so heavy that I stomp quite a bit when I hear it. And I noticed I wasn't even aware I was doing it the first couple of times. I'm like, I can enjoy this. So I sort of stomp around the room when Dallas scores if they're winning, or last night when they came back and tied it. But once I get into the video time, once I'm talking to all you fine people on the internet, that has to be gone. That has to be 100% gone. I can't be standing here and stomping around like, yeah, and then Dallas scored. It's not something I want to do, because again, it comes across badly, and rightfully so. It does come across badly, and so I'm not going to do that. And then with the Islanders, I did drop them on the power rankings, and the reason being that I was looking at the top 10 and I was going, okay, the Islanders in my eyes were a team that I felt belonged in that 11th spot, and I understand that people or Islander fans would be upset with that, but I am absolutely willing to move them back up this week, and they probably will end up moving back up this week because they're playing well. They're 16-10 overall. Now, I want to talk about injuries and why I don't talk about injuries in News of the Day videos. Also, with News of the Day videos, the argument has been made, and I've seen this plenty. Well, your News of the Day is old by the time you talk about it. Not always. Today's the Gerard Gallant video. In the News of the Day, I talked about Gallant. That was within 15 minutes of me seeing it on social media. So I report on things when I can, but there's also the fact that I'm not going to do multiple News of the Day videos throughout the day, because there's that law of diminishing returns, and then there's the fact that then I'm doing 7 or 8 videos in a day, and there's certain things that I don't think warrant their own video. That's how News of the Day was born. That I was like, okay, all these news items don't warrant their own video on its own, but I can talk about this as a group. And I know there's other channels that I follow that do the same thing. Wrestling channels will very often, they do their news video, and what they talk about is stuff that happened the day before. That's how they work. That's their format, and it works. So I like to be timely. Of course, with trades, I like to be timely. I like to be timely with certain news items, but with others, I think it's okay. And I think that people come to the channel looking for my take. They also want to discuss it with the community. And with some of the news items, it's interesting to look at it the next day and see, like, for instance, if there's a big injury and then the team comes through it and wins that game, and then I'm talking about it the next day, I can say, all right, so there's this injury that takes place. Maybe it's during the game, right? Maybe there's a big injury during the game, and they win it anyways. So I don't report on injuries like I did at the start. So when I started doing News of the Day, I wanted to get as many of the updates on the injuries as possible. But it's impossible because it changes from hour to hour. So you might hear, oh, this guy's out. Like the other day, Brock Besser is going to be a healthy scratch. I could have done a video on Besser being a healthy scratch, and hey, is his time in Vancouver up? Him being a healthy scratch is a bad sign. And then he played. So that video would have aged poorly within 4 hours of me posting it. And so I don't get into that. I don't get into that minutia right at the time. I want to do the News of the Day video later, and then it prevents me from getting into that. For the most part, there are times where I'll talk about something in a news video that ends up not being what was expected. So maybe it's an injury, it ends up being a little bit longer than expected. Maybe a coach gets a pat on the back from their GM and a public vow of support, and then within hours they're fired. Sometimes it's the GM that gets fired with the coach. So I want to talk about injuries, though. And I also want to say one last thing with power rankings. I don't care about points percentages. I don't care about the standings. I say this many times over. It's not important. And it's not important because teams have different schedules. There are teams that lose a game, and I go, you know what? They lost, but they played well. This team won, yep, but it was a shootout, and it was over one of the bottom 3 teams on the board. And the shootouts I treat like ties. So I used to do videos where I would explain all of that, similar to this, but I would get into the minutia of here's why this team dropped, here's why this team went up. And it was something that changed zero minds. Well, I understand your explanation. Still wrong, though. Oh, okay. So I know that's where people dig in, and that's okay. And when I'm talking about a team that somebody feels really passionate about and they follow and they love that team and they believe that team's the greatest, I can imagine it's not a lot of fun to click on a video here and me go, so they're not winning anything. So that's probably not a pleasant experience, right? Or how do you feel about my team's won a couple of games? How do you feel about them? Middle of the pack. That's one of those things, right? But that's where me trying to take the emotion out could sometimes be, I think, seen in a negative manner. But I want to talk about injuries, and I only want to talk about injured reserve, and I only wanted to talk about teams that I feel like are being hurt by injured reserve or could make that excuse for being hurt by injured reserve. I'm not even counting guys who are day to day, except one. One that's listed as day to day, meaning there's a lot of injuries that are not on this board, and I'm well aware. So, alphabetical order, starting with Anaheim. They're without Klingberg since November 24th. Why would that affect Anaheim? They don't have a lot of depth on the blue line. They're already one of the poorest teams in the league, talent-wise and experience-wise. Losing Klingberg, who's on a one-year prove-it contract, tough for him and for the team. Drysdale out since October 27th. This was supposed to be a big year for Drysdale to show his place in the NHL. I thought he made good progress last year. So it sucks to see him on the IR. And again, for Anaheim, they're a team that don't have the depth. So losing two top four defensemen has a bigger effect on them than it would on a team that has real depth. Carolina, they're without Freddie Anderson since November 7th. They've turned this into a positive. Kachetkov's come up and been fantastic, which means now there's a dilemma when Freddie Anderson's ready to return. What do you do? Do you waive Ronta? Do you look for a trading partner for Ronta? Because I would think right now, if you're Carolina and you're about winning games and getting into contention, I think Kochetkov has outplayed Ronta. Or do you do something crazy and look at Anderson on the market, right? Yeah. Likely no, and it's likely Kochetkov goes back to the minors, but it is hard to argue against his record right now. Kosh has been out since October 13th. He's a good goal scorer when he's healthy, but as you can see, he's not very often healthy. Pacioretty, of course, has yet to debut. Got hurt after they acquired him during the offseason. And it's been frustrating, I would imagine, for Pacioretty. But for Carolina, too, this is a top six winger who can score 35 goals a year. So when I talk about Carolina and how the advanced stats show they should have more goals and how I talk about, their attack just seems a little off, yeah, having Pacioretty out might be part of the problem. They didn't acquire Pacioretty to have him sit on the IR. They needed that top six forward. So that's something to keep in mind with Carolina. The record's pretty good, and they're still without a couple of key pieces. Colorado, who waived Galchenyuk and Magna today. So there's two ways to look at this. It's a paper move, and they're going to stay in the lineup, or maybe there's a couple guys who are ready to come back sooner than expected. So that's how I prefer to see it when guys get waived. But in all likelihood, Galchenyuk and Magna both clear. They both stay with the team, and it's a paper move. Manson has been out since November 30th, and again, these are just the guys on the IR except one. McDermott's been out since November 11th. Nichushkin's been out since October 27th. This is when they were added to the IR as well. Landeskog, of course, has yet to debut this season. The earliest you can put a guy on the IR is September 21st. That has been a big difference maker for Colorado. He's their captain. He's their leader. Helm hasn't played yet this year either. He was on IR since September 21st. And Bowen Byram is shown as day-to-day, but he's been out since November 4th. So he might be close to returning. Maybe it's him, right? And that's what Magna ends up on the waiver wire for. But it's been tough with Byram because he is a player that when he's healthy, he is one of the best young defensemen in the league. And staying healthy has been an issue for him. But at least it's not a concussion this time, right? So that's if there's good news, there's that, right? So for Colorado, yeah, that hurts, right? Losing Nichushkin, losing Landeskog. I know Rodriguez is day-to-day. Lekkonen's day-to-day. But with Colorado, they have really good organizational depth. Now, signing Galchenyuk has had people, there's a lot of giggling about Galchenyuk getting waived. And, he's going to go to team number 8. How many teams is he going to play for? But the reality is, Colorado does have decent depth. And so when I see the injuries to a team like Colorado, I don't assume the worst. I figure, you know what? Somebody else is going to step up because there's usually somebody else that steps up for them. They have that reputation. Florida has that reputation. Tampa Bay has that reputation. Toronto, honestly, has that reputation as well. There's usually somebody else that will step up when somebody gets hurt. For Columbus, a team that, of course, is down and out right now, but Jake Bean, out since November 14th. That's a blue liner. Blankenberg, out since November 10th. Blue liner. Zach Werenski, not playing the rest of the season, out since November 9th. blue liner. Voracek's a forward. He said today he may not return for the rest of the season. He's been out since November 4th. And Boquist, a blue liner, out since October 24th. So their blue line is basically crippled with what's been going on with Columbus. But again, I haven't heard a lot of conversations about the fact that Columbus's blue line's been decimated. And again, I don't look at Columbus and Colorado and think, well, they have about the same depth as Colorado. I don't see Columbus being able to absorb those losses. And that's something that I say too about, power rankings and records in general. The teams with really good depth can absorb this kind of an injured list. The teams that don't have that organizational depth can't. Detroit, you have Bertuzzi, now added to the IR since November 29th, and he had just come back for 7 games. Soderblom, November 9th. And Soderblom, even if he's not producing, you can just park him in front of the net. He's a key guy. Zadina since November 4th. So Zadina was off to a rough start to begin with, and now with him on the IR, that just doesn't help. And Fabry has yet to debut this season, right? Fabry, a player that we know is going to probably get hurt at least once a year. This is what he's going through now. And he's a good top 9 forward. Can be top 6, but a good top 9 forward. For Edmonton, it really is about the wingers, right? You got McLeod since November 26th. Yamamoto since November 9th. He was off to a slow start as well. Evander Kane since November 7th. The Oilers' results since Kane got hurt have been not bad. They've been okay. There is still the concern about scoring depth. There is still the concern about, Jack Campbell and his stats to start the season. But in general, they've been pretty good. So this is one of the reasons why I don't look at an injury and say, well, better bust them down on the power rankings then. And I don't expect doom and gloom either. Philadelphia, a team that there's been a lot of doom and gloom since before the season started. Injuries don't help. Wade Allison since November the 11th. James Van Riemsdyk since October 22nd. Sean Couturier, the entire season thus far. And Couturier is, I've said this before, for years I've said this, I think he's their most valuable player. And I think when Couturier's not in the lineup, you've lost your best defensive forward and one of your most dynamic offensive forwards as well. He really is, I want to say a poor man's Patrice Bergeron just because Bergeron's on that whole other level. That's pretty good. Couturier, one of the better defensive forwards who does have that offense in their game, and that's a huge loss. So is Ryan Ellis. When they acquired Ryan Ellis from Nashville, I don't think they expected this. And I don't know that when Nashville traded him, they expected this either. I don't think they knew they were trading a guy to Philly that would miss so much time. But there is a real debate about whether or not Ellis's career will start or will resume. So that's a top 4 blue liner right there. That's 2 top 6 forwards with Van Riemsdyk and Couturier. And just for fun, I put Bobby Brink on the board. He's a rookie. Could have been a decent top 9 forward and some young energy in that lineup. Who knows? And so they're missing some key pieces in Philadelphia, and they were already a team we had expected to be bad. So, yes, Chuck Fletcher should be on the hot seat, but he does have some excuses. He does have some reasons that he can point to and say, hey, look, if I had these guys in the lineup, they'd be better. And in Couturier's case and Ellis's case, he's probably right. Ellis, one of my favorite defensemen when he was in Nashville. It's sad to see that this is how it ends. It really is sad. And Couturier, one of my favorite forwards. Then with Toronto, who have continued to plug along despite the injuries, showing that if you have the right systems in place, if you have defensemen coming up from the AHL who know those systems, it's really important. Don't tell Tortorella. He doesn't think that systems between the AHL and the NHL have to match up. So Yarncroke's been out since November 29th. Not really a key guy, but still, that's a forward while you're missing so many defensemen. They've got Ben, who's been on the injured reserve since November 22nd. Riley since November 20th. Yeah, Morgan Riley, a defenseman who is absolutely fantastic. Brody since November 11th. So that's 2 top 4 defensemen. And Jake Muzzin since October 16th. So that is 3 of their top 4 defensemen out of the lineup. So what's happened in their stead with them out of the lineup, we have seen Giordano step up, get a lot more minutes. We've seen guys like Liljegren, Sandin step up. So Toronto has had these injuries that absolutely would work as an excuse, and they fought their way through them, and their record is still pretty good, which bodes well for later in the season when those guys get back. And with Muzzin, it's an if, right? With Muzzin, we don't know, but Brody, Riley, Ben, these guys all come back in, that'll help. And so, for Toronto, I would totally understand if this team right now was struggling and weren't getting wins considering their blue line, but they're still getting the wins. Vancouver, Pearson, Out since November 8th, Pullman since October 19th, and Dermott since October 7th. So why is Vancouver on the list? I will explain. Vancouver, already a team that was lacking in defensive depth. I think we can all agree that the defense, iffy at best, right? And if they play their systems like Toronto's have, they should be okay. But the defense has been a disaster for Vancouver this year. And not having Pullman and Dermott, while they're both guys that you could argue are overrated depending, they're both top six defensemen who have been lost by a team that could not afford to lose to two top six defensemen. So it's forced them to go out. They picked up Stillman, which has not worked out very well. They picked up Bear. I think Bear's been good, but I think I agree with people that say that it's kind of an indictment of the blue line if Bear's one of your best defensemen. It's fine if you say he's effective and he's playing well, but if he's one of your best defensemen, that does tell you that there's problems on the blue line. Hughes has been good offensively. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson, it's a bad contract, but I think he's played well. I do. I think OEL's played well enough. And so while I would like to see, his contract get moved if possible, I think he's played well. And then you get into the Capitals. You got Orlov out since November 4th. Malenstein since Halloween. Connor Brown since October 16th, and he's not coming back this season. Backstrom out before the start of the season. Right, September 21st. Backstrom, Wilson, Hagelin, all go on there. Hagelin, his career might be done. Backstrom should be back, and we'll see how effective he is when he gets back. And, of course, they really miss Tom Wilson. So there are some teams right now that are dealing with a lot of major injuries. And in some cases, in Toronto's case, they're excelling. In Carolina's case, they found another goaltender. In Vegas's case, right, they have Leonard, he's out for the season. Logan Thompson comes in and looks excellent. So, and they get to the point where Brossoit can go to the minors because Hill's been good too. So yeah, we'll see how things go the rest of the way. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. I don't hate teams. Basically, I watch the games. I might have a little reaction for teams I cheer for. And outside of that, I do the recaps and then I get ready and I start it all over again the next day. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.